And I love that your podcast is called What's Next. I think that's, in complexity, we're looking for emergent phenomenon. And really, as we put a foot forward, we're figuring out what's next, or what's the best move to make next to support the right kind of growth. Yeah. So, this sounds like an enormous process, but really it's quite easy to set up to make some decisions about who to bring on board. And just that can have profound effects on a company's performance and culture and future.
How do we navigate the challenges of the new world of work?
How can we do things differently, transforming our people and our organisations for the better?
It turns out there's quite a lot of later stage people in there, but they're hiding.
One of the things that surprised us when we first started working with the VUCA skills is how bad they were. Like, nobody had them.
The confusing aspect of the transformation process, and to consider in their own mind, maybe something right is going on with me.
Who is challenging our thinking and living at the edge of work?
And what can we all do to embrace new ways of working?
The reality is not a single job is without impact.
Around that want to try a different way of working, I think now's a really unique opportunity to do so.
Welcome to the What's Next podcast. I'm Dave Yates.
And I'm Peter Holiday.
Today we have Benny Ausmus.
For those of you who don't know Benny, he's the founder of the Big Change Agency for over a decade. He recently published his Transformational Leadership Compass. And as Dave just said, it's an Amazon #1 bestseller. Very, very good read. So if you're into the field of leadership out there and managing complexity in the VUCA world, it's well worth grabbing yourself a copy. There's some really very practical things in there that you can apply to your role and your career to give you the greatest chance to accelerate your career later.
So it's good to see you, Benny. It's been a little while since we've caught up, and thanks for taking the time to get back in touch with us and sit down for the What's Next podcast. Obviously, usually it's myself, Pete Holiday, and Dave Yates, so the Pete and Dave show. But today, Dave's unfortunately not with us, so it's just going to be the Pete and Benny show. So welcome to the What's Next podcast.
Thank you, Pete. Please send Dave my very best. But it's good to be here with you today.
Yeah, look, he's a bit unwell, but he's definitely on the mend. So fantastic. So like I said, it's great to have you back. We've chatted once before, but since we spoke to you last, what have you been up to? Be interested to hear.
Well, the short answer is helping change the way we make hiring and selection decisions. And I've been working with some amazing research institutes, people and companies and projects to help them really get their most important hiring decisions right. So that's super exciting, and a lot of the work we're doing is technologically groundbreaking, and it feels, look, I'm excited. I've been in this field for a dozen or so years, and I've never seen anything with this much potential for disruption and positive change. So I've been zooming into very specific client problems and then zooming out to much longer term visions of what the future of work is going to look like.
Yeah, which is really interesting because obviously the main part of our podcast really is talking about the future and what the future specifically of work will look like. And I heard you mention in there that you've had some technology breakthrough approaches. So I'd really like to hear, if you're okay and open to sharing, about your approach and also what you've learned over the last little while. You just mentioned that you've learned a lot as well, and I'd be interested to hear what your key learnings and findings were that drove you to, take a sort of a little bit of a different approach and, fork left or fork right and come up with something or, a different approach to the way we've been doing things for so long.
Yeah, well, I've been in the game of transformational change for most of my career, as I know you have as well. And change can be complex and difficult. And my book, the Transformational Leadership Compass, is a system to help. Thank you for the plug. It's a system to help leaders develop the ability to think in systems to navigate that change, to help facilitate, guide, shape, and build that change. And really, the biggest difference that makes the difference, I've found, is in the who. It's in who is in the right seat, and who's structured within the right set of seats and systems of seats to make effective ecological change work. So recently, I've been very deep in the work of getting role fit right at all levels of organizations. And the breakthrough is, well, for a long time, this has been, the realm of recruiters and talent acquisition managers who have a range of methodologies from CVs and role searches, right to multiple choice questions in assessments. And look, we know that the greatest predictor of role performance variance is real world mental ability. And, we know this, we're very, there's a lot of evidence to support that the greatest predictor of role performance variance is mental ability. And the Schmidt and Schaefer meta-analysis of 100 years of recruitment instruments certainly tends to suggest that quite convincingly. And up until this point, there's been massive constraints around being able to assess that. Typical mental ability assessments, which you've probably done, look like Sudoku puzzles and abstract shapes and multiple choice, and have very little bearing on real world scenarios. So I've been working with the folks at Lectica Institute, which is a not-for-profit out of Boston or out of Massachusetts. And their breakthrough, and what I consider to be the biggest disruption ever in our field, is the ability to score long-form assessments of real-world mental ability and decision-making aptitude at scale. So what that means is we're able to, for example, in a graduate program, we're able to assess every single person that applies with a long-form written response to a real-world problem. And using that as the first metric, the greatest predictor of success, determine who we should progress to later stages of interview and role fit. And the implications of this are enormous. Not only does it help us find the right role, the right career trajectory, the right organization for the person, but it also gives everyone a fair go, and it democratizes the hiring process as well. So yeah, that's a big change for sure. And I'm very excited to see how we can support organizations in getting their who right from the graduate level and all the way up through the organizational levels and layers.
Yeah. And so you're basically saying that the approach to recruitment is we look at the complexity of the organization and the roles within it, and then we make distinctions about the complexity of those particular roles, and then we assess people against the complexity of those roles based on mental ability. And so can you talk about, because I know as soon as you say mental ability, like 100 million people are going to think that means completely different things. So would you mind if you kind of explained in the particular approach that you're talking, what mental ability actually means? Because I think, you say cat and I say cat, and you think white cat, I think black cat, with the same word, but we still get different impressions of what that would mean. And I think when you use, especially in, an industry that's full of buzzword bingo, as I was discussing with a colleague this morning, that these particular terms can mean very, very different things. So if you could clarify mental ability for me, I think that would be really useful to both myself and many of the listeners out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, it's a direct measure of real world skill. It measures decision making, sophistication. So when we put somebody in a role, we put them in a role to make decisions. What we're assessing is their ability to make those decisions effectively. So when we talk in terms of real world mental ability, it's how well somebody thinks, reasons, and decides, and how that relates to the complexity demands of the role we're asking them to perform, which we know is the greatest predictor of how successful they'll be in the role. And it's important to point out higher isn't better. In many cases, it's worse. But what we're looking for is an appropriate level of challenge for each person to be able to turn up to their role and be challenged enough each day to be engaged, to be in hopefully states of flow after time goes on, and to really engage them to learn the way that their brains are designed to learn. So mental ability is this ability to think, reason, and decide. And role fit is the match of that ability, where the person's at, the task demands of the role we're asking them to perform. And when we get that right, amazing things happen. They learn, they become engaged, they become happier, they create less mess, as I'm sure you've experienced. So we're big on role fit and getting that first. Now, I'll make this one more distinction here. It's not the only predictor, and mental ability isn't the only predictor of success. However, it is the best predictor. So the difference here is we do that first, because if we get that right first, we're able to really then narrow it down further to who we're going to choose to work with.
So given that, what happens when you get people that use mental ability as your selector, but then you might have, let's say, 3 or 4 clients hypothetically, or 3 or 4 potential candidates for a particular role? You've got a varying degrees of mental ability, but people then choose based on so they may choose the person with the least mental ability to match the particular role that they've got, and they choose that based on other things such as personality. What happens there is in this process and the new approach that are you saying that you should try and not do that as much as possible?
Yeah, I'm saying we need to stop putting hyper assertive people that don't necessarily have the complexity of thinking required to solve the problems that the role requires, because they're the loudest person in the room. Yes, I do think that. I do think personality is important and goes a long way, but it is not the most important thing. And it's very clear. And I think putting that first and using that as to determine whether a candidate is suitable for the role is a massive disservice of leadership, and it has to change. Yeah, we need to look at, can they think through the day-to-day challenges first? Dr. Theo Dawson, who I think was on your show a bit before.
Yes, yep.
She has a great analogy for it. She says, okay, imagine we're looking for a scuba diver, right? And we only have one wetsuit, right? And it's a size 42 wetsuit, right? Would we go and start looking at scuba diving resumes? Would we go and do a big call to the local pool and check out everyone's scuba diving ability? Would we, base our selection on their personality and how well they get along with the rest of the divers? Or would we say, okay, the first thing we need to do is shortlist everybody that fits the wetsuit, because we can't have them come in and say, you need to lose 30 kilos in your first week. So the first thing we do is we go, okay, does this person fit the most important requirement of the role, which is, do they have an appropriate level of mental ability to be able to solve the problems, make the decisions, think through the issues and the complexities of the role first. Then we look at scuba diving skills. Then we look at interpersonal skills. Then we go, does their personality gel, match with the team, with the culture? Does their values there? But without that first piece, we're not going to make optimal decisions. And the biggest decisions we're going to make are the decisions to allow others to make decisions.
Yeah, so you're saying an approach that doesn't take this into account, and I imagine you get, if you don't take that into account, then the value you leave on the table continues to cascade for every decision that you don't use that approach going forward. Would that be fair to say?
It's the effects of, it's funny, a lot of talent specialists that I talk to sort of see it as quite black and white. It's either a good hire or a bad hire. But there is certainly a range to it. It's about the best person for the role. the best fit for what we're asking them to do. And if someone is better suited, we need to really have a look at that. We need to give everybody the opportunity to be able to demonstrate that. And yeah, I mean, somebody might be competent in their role when they apply and they're selected, but is that the ideal person? Well, we don't want to guess, and we don't want to allow archaic methods and biases and all the things that go along with being human to get in the way of the most important decisions. I think it's so important to get that right.
So wetsuit fit's the most important thing to start with.
The most important thing to determine first is how complex is this role? We need to know that. We need to know, okay, what's the complexity demands of the role? Then
can you tell me, can you split that open for me? Like when you talk about the complexity of the role, what constitutes a role complexity from your perspective? Yeah.
So we talk about a precise role complexity analysis. So we determine a range based on the task demands and the complexity demands of the role by examining detailed information about the organization and the particular role within the organization. And we're able to determine, okay, here's how sophisticated a thinker is required to be able to adequately perform that. And then we look at precise role fit, and it's, okay, who do we have in our talent pool that is perfect for this? That the wetsuits fits like a glove. You're a surfer, a body glove. There you go.
Yeah,
which is a wetsuit brand for the listeners. Yeah. So we do that first, and then we need to look at things like, interpersonal fit for the team, for the organization, skills, references, all of that remains and needs to be part of it. But the biggest thing I think, we have a very strong argument for that people get wrong is they're either bored or stressed in roles because they're not at an appropriate level of complexity to support their success, their learning, and their growth.
Yeah, and so obviously, when you're looking for a wetsuit fit, and you've spoken about the kind of the Goldilocks zone where people are, the right level of fit, the right level of skill. You've mentioned already that higher is not always better, and like, what are the implications of not getting the role fit right, both below by not having the capacity? I think we can imagine what that. But I'm interested in when you're above the role complexity, like what happens there?
Yeah, you're bored.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. If it's too high, the person is going to be bored. If it's too low, they're going to be anxious and stressed. Generally speaking, it's analogous to Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's flow. We have a name for it. It's not too hard. It's not too easy. It's just right. So we call it the Goldilocks zone.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
If I had a drum beat, there we go. Exactly. And do you find, so obviously in our podcast, we talk a lot about organizational dynamics, power dynamics, and a lot of the time in organizations, a lot of that is generated because this bit's not done very well at the start.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. And it doesn't all have to change at once, but so like in so much of my work in building leadership development programs and helping companies change and transform, when it works, it's because we have the right people supporting it at the right levels and layers, and it becomes so much easier to be able to manage. Management is about levels and layers of complexity. So we're trying to build a living ecosystem that can be the scaffold for true learning organizations, true organizations that support and develop and grow and become these amazing places to work. But I think we share that utopian vision for the world of work in the future. That's the whole reason we're doing this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It consumes a lot of my Friday afternoons with a glass of wine in my hand, staring at the sky, going, "Where is the utopia?"
Right. I've got to come to Adelaide and hang out one of these days. It sounds like fun.
because I just, again, like I mentioned, a lot of the dynamics that we have in organizations and the polarities that we play with, it's when this is not done well and people are either stretched way too thin or what do you see as an impact? Because I'm interested in the too high, like the people being bored, but I also see some pretty awful treatment of highly functioning people when they're beyond the system itself.
Yeah, it's a real issue.
Especially considering businesses are advertising openly for these people. We want the disruptors, we want this, we want the high capacity people, the high performers, and then those people like get really piqued and interested by those kinds of ads. They apply, and then they find out that the system doesn't actually support that at all.
Yeah, and I would suggest that our education systems and a lot of our corporate systems are not necessarily set up for people performing at that level of complexity. They're often overlooked. So one of the reasons I'm in love with this work that we're doing now is it allows us to see what we couldn't see before. Right? We're able to spot this. We're able to recognize that talent, and then provide appropriate environments to nurture it. The biggest problem here, and here's the breakthrough. We could measure this, and Lectica could measure this for quite a long time. They've developed the rubrics and the best assessments there. And you work with these assessments; they're very sophisticated, and they are and highly useful. There was constraints around that for a long time, in that to score one of these things, you needed, 2 analysts with 4 years of training, and it's expensive.
It is expensive and time consuming as well for everyone involved.
Yeah. So the breakthrough is that, based on all of that data, there's now an electronic scoring system that can do this at scale. So the implications of that is we can provide formative assessments to enormous numbers of people as part of the not-for-profit mission, and as part of the changing the way we work and the talent initiatives that Big Change are running as well. We're able to really assess everybody and make very data-driven recommendations of here's where this person will thrive, and accurate. And when we compare what we're doing in terms of written responses to real world problems and challenges, how do you make a decision? How do you go about doing this? Where there are no right answers in our assessments. They're real world. And when you compare that to multiple choice, where there's item banks and right answers, even for the uninitiated in this stuff, it's so glaringly obvious that what we're measuring actually matters. And then we're able to not only support people's learning and growth, but we're able to suggest where they're going to work best together. And that's the prerequisite for effective transformation in organizations. We need to get that right, or everything else is very hard, if not impossible.
It's quite interesting you say that, because it brings to mind someone that I know recently that had the same kind of challenges in an organization that's then gone somewhere else, where that the right level of support and the right level of openness is, and it's literally like a game. The difference is like chalk and cheese. So it talks to the experience for the individual as well, as much as yes, there's the science of the assessments and how they match up on the role, but the real value in the end is to the human being that's in that role, and actually the other human beings which that person interfaces with as well, and the quality of their life, because we spend a lot of time at work.
Yeah, it's super important to get right. It affects the individual and their growth. It affects their family. It affects the team in the organization. It affects the customer. It's really about getting that right, and it is within this interdependent system of the world of work that's existing. So what's the most important thing to get right? It's like, how do we measure role fit? How do we get that right? And how do we get that right as early on as possible from graduates, from frontline, and help people on this path of learning and growth? And then it ties into all of the most important things in, HR's remit. It's retention, it's employee performance, it's attraction of candidates, it's building cultures that people want to be a part of. I think all of this can be tied back to role fit and education mechanisms as two of the big forces there, and that's what we're most interested in changing.
Interesting. So going back to, can you take us through like the process that people go through in order for the kind of the role fit? Like what happens in the assessment? What would be an example of a question they might be being asked? Because I'm sure there'll be some HR professionals and probably talent acquisition specialists that listen to this to go, oh, that sounds really interesting. I want to kind of know more. And if we could provide them with an example of what that process might look like, I think they'd probably find that really valuable. Yeah,
100%. Well, the best articulation we have of this is on our website, which I will now shamelessly plug. It's bigchange.group. So that's there. But here's the process. We'll sit with the HR or the talent professional in the organization. We have a look at your organizational chart and position descriptions at each layer of that organizational chart. We map out something called a GRCA, General Role Complexity Analysis. And that's the ranges of complexity found at each level or layer within the organization. So, the CEO and the exec, we're expecting this range. The frontline entry roles, we're expecting this range, and overlap and everything in between. So we do that analysis. Then we look at what are the jobs that you're hiring for. It could be graduate positions, people coming in, whatever is important to hire for, we focus on them first. And we look at the role description. We have a consultation with the HR or talent professional, where we ask questions such as, what are the most complex challenges in this role? Who are they going to be managing or managed by, and how complex is that? We take them through a process to determine the precise role fit. And from that, we get a sweet spot. Sweet spot is just the level of complexity we'd like somebody to ideally be in their development journey to be engaged in the role. So we get that. Then what we do is create an assessment. And the assessment is a link that we give to the HR or talent acquisition specialist internally. And they send that link to everybody that meets the basic pre-screening requirements for the role. So let's say they're doing a graduate program, for example, and they've got 20, 50, 100, 1,000, 10,000 applicants, 1.2 million if you Google applicants for the role, right? Everybody gets a link to the assessment, right? And the cool thing is we don't charge for that. They can have all of Australia or all of the world soon take one of these assessments, and we just get the shortlist and the data of who we need to speak to. So they get a link, the link goes out to the talent pool, right? And when they log in, there's a welcome video from the company saying, hey, you've arrived, you're here, welcome to your assessment. We're going to be asking you to show us how you think about real world problems. And they're given a dilemma. And the dilemma is a real world scenario where there's no right answer that matches the roundabout complexity of something that they'd find day to day in a role like that. And
could you give an example what that might be like? Like a dilemma might be, would it be something around organizational change or?
Yeah, it could be for that. An example that quite often that we use, we don't give out the dilemmas too often because we have to change them when they've been out for too long.
Oh, yeah.
We have very good ways of detecting plagiarism. That's not a thing, but I'll give you a vague example of it. And if anybody would like to see actual dilemmas, like let's talk, we'll walk you through them. But a common one is you have a superstar in your team. This particular person is a rock star performer. They really get the targets smashed out of the park every time. They perform well. However, they can be quite aggressive and arrogant. They've reduced morale in several other members of the team. And then your HR director comes and says you have to have a word with them and put them on probation. And then your manager comes and says to you, well, we need that performance, those numbers to contribute to your team's target. And then you've got to explain how you go about working through this. And it's thorny and it's difficult and it's real world. And the questions we ask are, what's important to consider in making a decision around this? What decision would you make and how would you go through that process? And what we're asking somebody to do is show us how they'd approach this dilemma. And this is a written response. People go, oh my God, it's not multiple choice. I don't just tick boxes. It's like, no, you have to show us how you think about these things. And it works on this premise. If you can explain it to me so I understand it, you understand it. If you can't, you might, but who knows? And it's not going to necessarily help us in solving these problems that we have day to day. So everybody sits that assessment. It takes an hour to 90 minutes, or we don't time it. People can take their time and do it. So you can have 50 candidates, you can have 1,000 candidates all sitting and doing it. And then we close out the assessment. Every single person that sits it, whether they're successful in the role or not, gets a Lactico report. They get a version of a report that helps them develop skill, helps them identify what's next for them and what's a great thing that they could work on to improve their employment prospects and improve their ability to learn and think. So we gift that to everybody that takes an assessment, which is really cool.
That's amazing. Yeah,
that's cool. It's not a full, report version like you would use with your corporate clients, and it's not that depth, but it's it's full of rich learning suggestions and highly valuable for people. So they go through the process
for the effort, right? So some of people get something for their effort.
Yeah, well, that's the mission there. It's they go through the process of really thinking hard about it and challenging themselves, because we want to see, how they approach these things. But we're very lucky to be able to give them a report of, okay, here's what you're great at, and here's where you can build skill. So that gets gifted to every single candidate, and that's wonderful for the candidate experience. It's great for the company's brand to build that, and it's great for our mission to change the way the world learns and thinks. So that's really cool. That goes out to everybody, and then we get a short list of people that are fit to the role, and we get on a consultation. We say, okay, of everyone we've assessed, these are the people that are very likely to perform very well in this role, and we should then interview them. We should then really look at their career trajectory and potential within the organization, and we use that data to then inform who we should be talking to. So essentially we can look at a whole talent pool, assess everybody, and give everybody a fair go in and
an unbiased fair go, right? Because they're all the things of, I like that person, that person's a lot like me, I resonated with that person in the interview. That, like, you don't even get a shot at that, doesn't even get to influence the result, because really when you get and if I'm understanding this right, by the time you get the candidate pool, those people are going to be okay, varying degrees of okay anyway. So then it does come down to, okay, I like that person, or that person's going to suit our culture. You've removed all of those individual biases by the primary screening mechanism.
Pete, you get it. It's a fair go, and it's a much fairer go for people, because we're humans, we're fallible, we're full of bias. As hard as we work to get around that, what we want to do is give everybody a shot to step up to the plate, and then we go to interview them. And then it's, do I like this person, or do they remind me of my ex, or all of this stuff that goes on in the process that makes it unfair. At the end of the day, we want the best fit for the role for people, and we're able to provide a fair playing field for that. So that gets created, and then we suggest, okay, here are people that really match this role, and then perhaps within that pool, there's people that are suited to other roles in the organization. So we start to map out what precise role fits are required for what roles, and we can do all sorts of cool stuff, as you're aware. From there, we can help plan from entry level career trajectories with advice on how to develop them and how to increase their speed of development and growth and keep them on that learning edge. We can inform those those learning and development decisions from an advisory point of view with really really great and formative science. So the cool thing is, well, look, it allows us to do all of this really cost effectively. And the claim that we make on the website, because we all have to do marketing, is that it cuts your recruitment cost in half and doubles its effectiveness, which is a pretty conservative claim, because when you look at what we're doing, it's actually a lot more than that. But the idea now is we can add significant value to the HR function.
Well, and to everyone in the process as well. Because I think, traditionally, recruiting and hiring is, from a value exchange, is definitely usually a thing that goes one way, except for a few, or realistically in the end, one successful candidate, right? So it's a disproportionate exchange of value to a degree, where this is great because the business identifies the talent, but then the talent that is applying for the role also gets an exchange of value back. And so that really, the two things that have come up for me is that and also the level of fairness about how it makes it, because it's just, you like myself have been in this industry for a long time, and so many, and even more so, and I only harp on it because I think the impact is bigger, especially towards the top end of town, when you're talking about executive positions, and the fact that so many more people interface up with an executive position, when that's done really poorly, like I've seen it done in the past, it's hideous for both, for all involved, for the organization, for the leader, for then the subordinates that report up to that role. Again, about that quality of life is just really terrible.
Well, I think enormous results can be seen very quickly at just going from entry level or even supervisory or middle management level. I think the implications of going to the C-suite with this, it's too disruptive for the organization as a whole to work that way. So we strongly recommend that organizations use this for their grad programs, for their early or their middle management selection within recruiting, and bringing people in and using that there. That said, it depends. It really depends on what's going to add the most value and what's going to help the organization best next. And I love that your podcast is called "What's Next." I think that's in complexity, we're looking for emergent phenomenon, and really, as we put a foot forward, we're figuring out what's next, or what's the best move to make next to support the right kind of growth. So, this sounds like an enormous process, but really it's quite easy to set up to make some decisions about who to bring on board. And just that can have profound effects on a company's performance and culture and future.
I think too, what's even more so, and it's really interesting that this has evolved for you right now with the future of work and distributed work and hybrid work, and the fact that people spend less time in roles and organizations because work's becoming more and more project based every day, every hour, pretty much. So that we're going to have people coming in and exiting systems, which our organizations are more frequently, that if we don't make the right choices because of the sheer amount of exiting and entry from those systems, the potential for disruption of the wrong people coming in and out all the time. Like, I just think that that the impact of that is possibly profound, and there's no better time than there is at the moment for something like this, because this approach and this focus is going to be what's going to help give organizations some equilibrium through this constant entry and exit. If you're getting the right people that can maintain the equilibrium of the system, then that would be really beneficial.
Yeah. It may even sound cliched, but hire the right people and trust them to deliver. And
yeah, because a lot of organizations that I've worked in where that's not necessarily the case is, it's, and you've been doing this a long time, you've used these assessments a while like I have, and when you get trained, it becomes really obvious very, very quickly, and you don't even have to be engaged in something like a formal interview. You can just be in a meeting and just be listening and watching, and you can really quickly identify, from a mental ability perspective, where people are quite quickly by the way they're responding, just the way that they work on common work problems.
Yeah. And gosh, it's, the world is not getting any less complex.
No.
Right. So the idea is this can be kind of dangerous in the sense that we have a scoring system, and the purpose of that scoring system is to foster great developmental opportunities for people within organizations to make the world better. But we're as a society and as a species, we're generally kind of traumatized by assessments and scoring and that kind of thing from school. I know I am, and I know that the majority of people that I talk to really, really have an attachment to that. So we try to lean away from that as much as possible and focus on fit to role, focus on people's growth and formative growth and how they can keep going and learning throughout their life. And we just happen to have a methodology that is very, very effective in getting that right. So I think forming that out in a way that it supports new talent, it supports incoming talent, it supports the choices we need to make going forward. I'm not a big advocate of doing a lot of this in-house for restructures. I mean, we can do that and we're around it. What floats my boat and what I'm really excited about is the decisions we make of who to bring into these organizations, what talent is going to thrive in these conditions, because it's so important to get right, and it's not disruptive to what the system is already, which is complex, and we really have to respect that. It's like, so I'm into who are the newbies coming in? How do we get the best of the best? How do we spot what other companies and corporations can't see in the talent pool and go, yes, this one we're going to fast track to a role because we know that they're going to be able to do it really well, and then we can nurture that. We can coach them and grow them.
And I think the other good thing about this assessment and way of going about thinking about talent is, like, in a certain sense, it cuts through all the human crap as well. Like, that talent that you said can exist in an organization, but can, because of the nature of the culture, can be in the corner and too scared to show itself. But when you get to do this assignment, like, that gets taken away, so that person gets the chance to explore all their capability in a safe medium to where they can display their talent, where no one's going to talk down to them, no one's going to point at them, no one's going to talk over them. And so it does level the playing field as well, which and that's why I think the thing that's really inspired me about talking to you today is like the essence of fairness that goes into this approach, which is because, like, work life is so unfair for lots of people in organizations. And that a lot of the times, like, I'm sure it does with you, the level of unfairness and the way that happens to people can be, heartbreaking.
Yeah. It's archaic. having the loudest person in the room or the most confident or alpha.
Yeah.
Hasn't really worked, Pete, like as a model. So I do really appreciate that you get this. It is about creating an opportunity for people to demonstrate their ability to make decisions, and recognizing that and going, you know what, this person is able to think through some of our more serious problems. Perhaps they should be involved in this conversation. That's exciting. That allows us to unearth that talent. That allows us to nurture it and grow it. And I agree with you, man. I think there's a whole world of people out there that are underutilized and what did Thoreau say? Living lives of quiet desperation. If we can provide the right kind of opportunities for people's talents to come through. God, what kind of world would that create in the future of work?
And I think that's really what we're talking about in that aspect of fairness is what is the overarching effect of more fairness on society. So it's not just in your organization, but better roles, more enjoyment at work, better life. Like, how does that impact society as a whole going forward?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to know what's fair as well without the right kind of metrics around it, because that all becomes very subjective as well. So without going too far down this this line of inquiry, there's the fairness of fairness. It's like who determines, and it's like, well, can we agree that we put people in positions to make decisions, right? And they're decisions with various levels of risk and various levels of responsibility, right? How do we figure out who should make those decisions? What's the person with the most competency within that role to be able to do it, to be able to learn while they're doing it, and to be able to grow in the process? That's what we're looking for. So when we break it down like that, it's like, all right, we're problem solvers and we're decision makers in work life. We're also, social creatures that we have to be able to do that in a way that inspires and creates relationships that thrive as well. So we need to be able to have the right kind of way of determining that fit without letting all of these biases, wherever they may sit, getting in the way. We need to give people a fair go, and in doing that, we can help shape organizations that can be true learning organizations, can be these places where people don't just add value to the company and shareholders and society, but they're amazing places to grow. They're places where people can learn and accelerate the potential of themselves and others, and all of that stuff that makes it exciting and meaningful to be alive.
I'm getting a bit teary.
If I can make you cry, that's my benchmark for the day.
Well, it's just dealing with it as you would all day, every day. Like, you see the potential that's left on the table day in, day out by people that are in the corner that don't get the opportunity, and the escalation and magnification of poor choices at this primary first insertion into an organization that has like this cascading effect across people's lives. And it's just sad to see that it's taken us to now to get to the point where we've finally got technologies and approaches and methodologies where we can minimize that and accelerate the other option.
But how exciting. It's
totally exciting.
It's a chance to reshape the world of work, and gosh, that's cool. And I'm really glad that the people that I get to work with in this are really good, moral futurists that envision a utopia where everyone has the opportunity to learn and grow and be who they're meant to be and grow up and find joy and meaning and purpose and happiness in that journey. So that's people's birthright, and we can restore it through work. And ultimately, it'd be great to restore it through education systems. But I have a feeling that's going to be a longer war.
It's a big boat, that one, to turn. So
yeah. So where do we start? Well, we start with companies that want to have great people performing together and great culture, and want to get great talent, nurture it, and grow it. So that's who we should be talking to, and that's who we're working with. Companies that get it, love it, and have enough pep in their step to be on the front foot with these kind of things, and go, yeah, okay, this is the best tech we got, hands down. And you spend 5 minutes on our website, you're like, okay, yeah, there's nothing like this. That's cool. And then it's a couple experiments. It's like, okay, let's look at one role and let's see how well we can do this. And then when that happens, we're able to.
How's your interface with organisations about bringing this new approach across? Because like you, I get to interface with the HR functions and talent functions quite a lot, and a lot of them can be quite set in their ways, and you know what? All fairness to them, right? So they've been educated, they come through, they go through work experience, they learn these methodologies, and then suddenly Benny turns up and says, that's all crap. You need to be on board with this because this is the way of the future. So how do you find your reception into a field that's quite traditionally orientated with this kind of new approach that a lot of people probably haven't heard of before, that the idea and concept of sort of developmental myetics and hierarchical complexity and all these buzzword bingo ideas where people, a majority of them look like deer in headlights when you talk about them because they don't know anything about them. How's the reception when you're coming with a completely new approach?
Yeah, well, I'm learning. And one of the things I'm learning is that I need to be coached by them. So, So first of all, we need to meet people that can look at this stuff and go, wow, okay, this is, and everyone's approach everyone's response to this is we've never seen anything like this. This looks really amazing. I'm yet to come across someone that hasn't invested the time to look at that and said that. And then from that point, I need to be coached because I'm stepping into a strange land where I do not know the systems, the politics, the dynamics, the people, anything like that. So I need to be coached and work for them to help them be successful in their function and role with this. And it's not everything you're doing is crap or this methodology is crap. It's like, no, let's see how we can enhance this process, see how we can help. And at the same time, I've really had to learn the humility of knowing that I don't know what the heck is going on in this organization when I step in. So when I look for HR professionals to work with and with this, I'm really looking for someone that can educate me as we share this methodology as well. So it's very much it's got to be a two-way street of what we're doing, and then we can find the right experiments that are going to be minimally disruptive to business as usual, celebrate the success, showcase how they've done things in an awesome way, and then build on that. So yeah, it's really finding sponsors that they know that something needs to change. Typically, they've got a lot of the company's major problems dumped on their desk, and it's tough. So we respect that. We try and help them solve their difficult challenges, which are complex challenges as well. And yeah, that's the approach.
I think HR gets a little bit of a raw deal a lot of the time when you talk about it in organizations. There's so much, because we're so externally orientated generally, the way that businesses operate, we're all, chief financial officer this, growth officer that, grow, bigger, more money, show me show me the P&L, this and that, but the people, and, you know, I see a lot of, you know, even in the ads, right, for people for roles, it's, you know, as a senior HR professional, you'll have the, you know, the luxury of working, you know, or reporting to the senior executive team. Not, well, you should, like, the people are the thing that power the organization. Like, it should be default that your senior HR person is a key, if not the key member of your executive team.
Do you think
but
it's changing?
Seems to be the way. Oh, I think it's definitely changing. I think so. I think it's slow though. Still, I think a majority of, you know, you only have to look at a majority of, you know, who sits in senior positions. It would be, from my experience, it would be far and away disproportionately male. Definitely still. So, and those functions, you know, even if you look at salaries in listed companies, you know, chief financial officer and a lot of those sort of traditional finance roles still pay 30-40% more than the executive equivalent of a people function. So people executive. So I think we're on our way, but I think we've still got a fair way to go.
Yeah. I think it really is an area that needs whole of business support, and quite often it needs to, like, if we can come in and be a champion of HR, and have a good sponsor and a good relationship with people who are tasked to report on these things, that's ideal. And it's winning their little battles towards shaping culture. You know, it's about little battles and being able to demonstrate, hey, we did something really cool here, and we can measure it. And that's what the CFO wants, right? It's like, a lot of this stuff, it's you know, satisfaction surveys and you know, these kind of metrics that are well, they can be considered not to be, certainly not as hard as the bottom line, right? So if we're, and I'm being diplomatic, if we're able to bring really useful data and tell compelling stories with it, we're able to help HR's voice on the exec and C-suite be a lot stronger as well, and we can help ultimately, you know, steer the ship with those things, with those decisions, and that's really where we're heading with this stuff. But you know, we try to be the quiet partner that doesn't, you know, doesn't rock the boat too much, because it doesn't need that necessarily. It just needs the right intervention at the right time. It's like, you know, a good physician, you know, makes an adjustment, and then the body does the rest, right? So really working with HR to figure out where to intervene. It's going to have the least disruption and the most impact. That's a constant thing we're looking for.
And so you've landed up here that and I hope you're okay to talk about this on the podcast, but traditionally your organization has been leadership and change, obviously the big change group. Is that still a core focus of the business, or have you really done a sort of a 180 tilt towards, like, you know, because it sounded like at the future that this was your future for the next 10 to 15 years? Are all the previous incarnations and utilizations of the big change group still in existence, or have you really kind of narrowed down and this is kind of your focus going forward?
Our mission's the same. You know, my intention with big change is the same. We've just found the most effective way to bring tools and scale to what we're doing. You know, to be able to have a lasting impact and legacy. You know, beyond a small team of consultants and facilitators and coaches, we now have very powerful tools and systems that we can empower others to create amazing change in the world. So that's the biggest change, so to speak, for us. It's okay. We need to be able to use the best tools and methodologies to be able to scale out and to do more and to affect more change. So that's exciting, and that's involved a rebrand and that's involved a painstaking distillation of the message, because it's, we're often a bridge between real thought leadership in this space and the developmental space and into something that's commercial and useful and succinct. So we've put a lot of work into that, and now we're out there just meeting people and learning about their challenges and how we can help. And it's exciting. We're certainly in a lot of very, very exciting projects and programs that will
Excellent.
be much bigger than just a few of us. It'll so stay tuned.
I will. So we're coming up to an hour 10 that we've been going. We usually kind of run our podcast for anything up to an hour. So in closing, if I'm a HR professional or a talent acquisition specialist and I've been listening to this and I want to learn more about everything we've spoken about today, about how we get the right people in the right role in the right organizations at the right time, and with a focus on moving talent in and out of organizations and the future of work, where would I go to get more information, and who would I talk to other than yourself, Ben?
Sure. Bigchange.group is the website. lecticalife.org is the other website.
Yep.
Happy to if people want more, look, I know you said other than myself, I'm happy to spend the time, or our colleagues.
I meant case studies, white papers, anything like that might. Then having 6,000 people, talent acquisition specialists, ring up and talk just to you.
Well, that would be something to manage. We have a series of case studies being published at the moment on the website. We will have very soon, I believe 3 weeks, we will have an explainer video that will be released that we can send all your listeners if you like.
Absolutely.
That is a very succinct version of what this does. There's webinars coming up that'll be published quite soon. We can make all of those available on request to people. We're a small team and we're growing rapidly. So a big part of my role is to connect with people that have a genuine interest in this stuff, and I'll always invest the time to do that. Because this really matters to us, and if it matters to them, then there's conversations to be had. We'll see if we can help.
Absolutely.
And LinkedIn,
LinkedIn.
a good one.
Yep, connected on LinkedIn. So I imagine by the time this particular episode goes through production, post-production comes out, that if you're a talent specialist or a HR person, you're listening to this, then all those resources will probably be available by then. So you should be able to just go over to bigchange.com.au or no au?
Bigchange.group.
.group. There you go. And you'll be able to access group. You'll be able to access all of those resources, I imagine.
Yep.
I'd also like to thank you, Benny, for making yourself available today. It's been an awesome chat, like it always is. You and I have both come from very, very similar backgrounds. We've had very similar training. We use very similar instruments. We've got some very similar thoughts on lots of things. So it's always, if you can't listen to yourself think, you might as well talk. You might as well talk to someone who's very similar.
Yeah, Pete, thank you. I forgot we were on a podcast for a minute there. I just felt like we're hanging out, exchanging ideas and thoughts. So it's really good to see you, and thanks for having me on the show. And hopefully we get to do it in person one of these days, now that that's a thing again.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's so good to always have a conversation about work that's going to have impact at that, hopefully societal scale, because work organizations, they've been, apart from the pandemic, they've been pretty much the same for the last 100, 150 years, and it's time for a change. Like, you only have to see the way work's going at the moment and the way people are, overworked and stressed and, in a recovery phase from the last couple of years, that, we need to do something differently. Yeah,
well, this excites me because through your background and understanding of this, I know you get the implications of what we're doing. So that to me, it's like, some people sort of catch on to it. It's like, oh, wow, really? Is that what it is? Some bigger recruitment firms get it and they go, oh, shit. But to hear someone that really understands this work and has a vested interest in improving the conditions for humanity, it's pretty awesome, man. And make that flight to Adelaide.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pete.
No worries. Thanks, Benny. Take care.
That's the end of today's episode. Thanks for listening. What's Next is brought to you by TheNXT. We are workplace futurists and transformation facilitators. You can reach us on the web at www.thenextnxt.com.au. Please ensure you subscribe to our channel to ensure you don't miss our up and coming episodes.